It's one thing when a man catches a fish. It's another thing when a fish catches a man. And that's the story of Jonah, right? Some scholarship looks at it as parabolic narrative. Others talk about, like, for example, in 1891, there was a fish that swallowed a man. There's hyperbole. There's over-the-top, colorful pictures of this. This is an amazing story, and I couldn't be more thrilled to teach the book of Jonah this morning. But what's really funny is, like, all the characters do the opposite of what you would think they would do. So Jonah, for example, is a pouting prophet, but then the pagans are praying pagans. So there's a pouting prophet, there's praying pagans. Then, for example, you look at, like, the fish is more obedient than Jonah. Like, God in the story tells the fish to vomit Jonah out, and it says the fish obeys. So the fish and the pagans and the Ninevites are actually more godly than Jonah himself. So the characters are always doing what you wouldn't expect them to do. So it's one thing when a man catches a fish, it's another thing when a fish catches a man. Now, Jonah, he doesn't want to go to Nineveh, and we're going to read the entire book, but Jonah doesn't want to go to Nineveh. And at first you think, well, he's probably afraid. It's kind of like parachuting into Berlin or Munich during World War II, saying, down with the Third Reich. Like, you wouldn't really want to do that because you die. And the Assyrians were the enemies of the Israelis. So at first you think Jonah's afraid, but then you learn that he actually has other motives as to why he doesn't want to go. It's not because he's afraid. It's because he knows that God's full of mercy and gracious, and he doesn't want his enemies to get forgiven or loved on by God. So what's fascinating about this passage is, as we study Jonah verse by verse, what you're going to find is the power to learn God's grace, God's mercy, God's forgiveness, not just for you, but even on your worst enemies. And it really starts to free up your heart. So I couldn't be more thrilled to go through this book. This book is 1,328 words. Only 4 chapters, 2 pages, 1,328 words. It's not a long book. And it's very colorful, sort of comic book over the top, in that it uses the word great or huge, great, 15 times in this book. So great, it means huge. 15 times in this book, the Hebrew word huge or great. So the fish is huge, the storm is huge, the boat is huge, the city is huge. It keeps using this word very great, exceedingly great, great, huge is the idea in Hebrew. In these short 2 pages, you see that 15 times. Now, the city of Nineveh, where Jonah's called to preach, was founded by Nimrod, who was the great-grandson of Noah, Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Now, why does Jonah not want to go there? Well, because he doesn't want God to show grace and mercy to Nineveh. But why? Because the Assyrians were brutal enemies. The Assyrians are actually responsible for wiping the northern 10 tribes of Israel off the map forever. Nowadays, it's amazing. Like, one of my best friends, he's a professional UFC fighter. He's an Assyrian. In fact, one of the oldest Christian churches is Assyrian. So it's amazing how God has redeemed that. But back in Jonah's time, the Assyrians were actually the ones responsible in antiquity for wiping the northern 10 tribes of Israel off the map forever. That's why you don't see the northern 10 tribes anymore. Why? Because the Assyrians wiped them off the face of the map. They were very brutal. I'll just give you one example. They would skin people alive. So they would go to a city, they would skin the leaders of the city alive before they deported the people back to Assyria. So Jonah did not like these people. And you could imagine, like we saw in more recent times, Hitler, like it'd be with the gas chambers, it'd be very hard for a Jewish person to forgive sort of the Third Reich. Do you understand why Jonah does not want to go there? Now, what's really interesting is Jonah is the son of Amittai. Now, the word Amittai means faithfulness, and Jonah means dove. So when you think of a dove, you think of peaceful, you think of docile, you think of humble, like the dove coming for Noah when the storm was done. Very peaceful animal. Extend the olive branch of peace. That's where you get the phrase when the dove had the olive branch in his beak. Like, you think of peaceful. So dove, son of Amittai, dove, son of faithfulness. What a joke. Like, you have to cue the laugh track right there, because you're reading this and you see dove, son of faithfulness, Jonah, son of Amittai. That's what it literally means. And you think this guy is not faithful and he's not dove-like. He's actually very, very grumpy. So in just a second, we're going to go verse by verse reading this, but I want to point out a few more things. This is a very unique prophetic book. Usually when you read the book of like Obadiah or Micah, it's the words of the prophet, and what you expect to see is the words of the prophet. This kind of pulls a fast one on you because Jonah, unlike all the other prophetic books, it's not so much his words as a prophet as much as a story about a prophet. So it's not so much words of a prophet as much as a story about a prophet, and a very mean, nasty prophet, might I add. He was a grumpy guy. Now, Jonah was mentioned by Jesus. Remember? The sign of Jonah I give to you. He was swallowed 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a fish. So the Son of Man will be swallowed 3 days, 3 nights by the earth. He used that as a sign. And again, in 1891, when this guy, according to the Princeton Theological Journal, was swallowed by a fish, the acids made him like all white and shriveled and stuff, like parchment, kind of like a recycled Michael Jackson. But basically, is anybody awake? You're allowed to laugh. I give you permission. But basically, I mean, it would mess up your skin. It's the sign I give to you. He was like almost a walking parable, as it were. Now, Jonah is mentioned one other time in the Old Testament. Only one other time. Everyone say one. Everyone say one. And it was during the reign of Jeroboam II, Jeroboam II. Now, you remember Jeroboam I? He seceded, sort of perhaps to start a civil war against Rehoboam's Israel. Remember, he only listened to the young men, not the old men. I'm going to tax you with scorpions, or my father taxed you with whips. So Jeroboam seceded from Rehoboam. Jeroboam introduced 2 calves into the temple, golden calves. Does that ring any bells? He's bringing them back to an Egyptian mindset, the golden calf that the Israelites built in the wilderness with Aaron, you remember, in the desert when Moses was on Mount Sinai. So Jeroboam was a very wicked king. And Jeroboam II was one of Israel's worst kings, okay? Jeroboam II was one of Israel's worst kings. And the one other time we see Jonah mentioned in the Old Testament is when he's talking to Jeroboam II, and guess what? He is prophesying favorably over Jeroboam II. He's currying the favor of the powerful. He's in the room of power in the Oval, and he knows the guy's evil, but he speaks favor over him. It's like he was trying to cuddle up and cozy up to the powerful, trying to curry the favor of the great one. And so he prophesies favor over Jeroboam II, that he's going to win a battle and regain all the territory on Israel's northern border. So he's going to regain all this territory in Israel's northern borders. Your land's going to be expanded. All this territory in the northern border, you're going to regain Jeroboam II. That's what Jonah prophesies. And guess what? It happens. But check this out. Amos, the prophet Amos, goes on to also confront Jeroboam II, and through him, God reversed Jonah's prophecy. So Amos, it's like a Israeli Jehovah prophet battle. Jonah's prophesying favor over Jeroboam II. You're going to regain all this territory on Israel's northern border. But then Amos comes in and actually undoes the prophecy of Jonah and says, you're going to lose all that territory to Jeroboam II, promising that he promises that Jeroboam would lose all of those same territories because he and the Israelis, the 10 northern tribes and their king, was so horrible. What does this mean? If you're a first century Jew, or not even a first century, like even way BC, reading this story, you're immediately suspicious of Jonah's character. You're immediately suspicious of this guy. Like, okay, this guy has a fishy character. He's hard to swallow, right? Here's a suspicious guy. Now, open up to Jonah chapter 1, and what you're going to find is this has a beautiful design. There's literary pairing, there's symmetry. It's a very beautifully written book. And let's just go verse by verse through this morning. Jonah chapter 1, verse 1. Again, the beautiful design, literary pairing and symmetry. It's just a compelling narrative. Ben Courson here. Thank you so much for watching my new YouTube channel. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Share this video with all your friends and hit that bell so you're notified every time a new video comes out. May the hope be with you.